Hi, everyone. Today, I am joined by James Brown, one of the smartest hoteliers that I've ever come across. James is the GM of Atlantic Tower Motor Inn in Southern Australia. He's also the chief guru at BizTech Guru, which is a consulting company helping small businesses automate their operations. Thank you so much for joining us, James.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And I've heard you talk about passionately about technology, and as one of our clients, I've seen you go through everything that's happening with COVID just right now. Um, what I wanted to just really ask you was, how are you able to keep your operation and hotel running remotely? And how did you identify that, that one day you might actually have to run an operation completely remotely of a hotel? That's almost unheard of.
Yeah. So look, I hand in my heart, I didn't plan for a pandemic either. Didn't have the resources nor the foresight to think of something that, to the extent of what's happened and what's impacted us here. We, like most people, have had international borders closed, but we've had our state borders closed, and we've gone down to circa, between 2 and 4% occupancy. So we actually get excited when an individual booking comes through. It's quite a moment. But yeah, there's we're going to pick up out of that. We've had a few things on the horizon that are sort of going to take shape for us. But in terms of how we've come about to be able to operate remotely, I know, looking around a few of my competitors, that we're probably the only one, or the only one that's visible in terms of the way that we're communicating to our customers. And I guess it's centered around the values that we've ran the business from, which is probably predominantly three, which is keeping it simple, continuous improvement, and data-driven decisions. So the keeping it simple thing is, you've probably heard us sort of saying that anyone can make a solution, but the beauty is making it simple. So for me, it's about yes, overcoming challenges when we are faced with them, but how can we make it more easy? How can we make it such that if someone walks in off the street and reads a couple of dot points of a procedure, they might be able to understand how to perform that function? So that's been at the core of it. Also, continuous improvement. That's my bag. That's the type of thing I love doing, and it's more so that when we encounter issues and barriers, we might not be able to overcome that at that moment in time. It might be something that we haven't got the time on our plate to be able to resolve that then and there, but we will log those things. And these days we use sort of technology to do that, but back in the day it was just writing down a piece of paper. I remember getting told off in one of my first jobs about writing down too much stuff. Even though we couldn't solve that problem then and there, it was more so about having the foresight to go, well, in the future we might have an opportunity arises to change what we're doing there, and we need to keep in mind that was, for example, a friction point with customers, that we couldn't do that. So keeping a record of the types of things that we've encountered in the past, such that when we are making decisions around that, that we can make a better decision, which just comes to the third value of data-driven decisions. So I guess when we're using technology a lot more than I have been in the earlier days of me running businesses, technology has the ability, obviously, to create data as you're doing things. And it's not that, again, you necessarily need to use that data then and there, but it's more so that you have that data available such that when you look back maybe over the last couple of years, when you're going to make a decision on something, you can assess that data and see, let it use, probably take out bias and use it to guide your decision making in the future. So that's very much, I guess, the way we work, and how it's come to be that we can work a bit more off-site. But I guess the core of the running remotely has come to the fact that in Australia, we have a very, very high staff labour costs. And so it's always been about, well, how do I keep things flexible? How do I keep things as low cost as possible, so we can invest in more important areas of the business if need be? And, this particular business, we've never had someone on site 24/7. It's just never been viable. We used to have to pay for someone to live on site in the building. And that became sort of, I guess, unviable as time's gone past. And so, when we had a customer, for example, losing their key in the middle of the night, we're like, well, how do I solve that? Short of me back in the day jumping out of bed, driving into the motel. It's a half-hour round trip, and whilst when my wife did start dating me, she thought she was dating a doctor in terms of, was always jumping up and going and tending to things in the middle of the night. But it wore thin after a little while. So we did things like we put in a key safe that we could simply give the customer the PIN. They can get a second key once we can verify their identity. But we also, again, sort of thinking about what might we use this in the future. We got a key safe that had double the number of key spots that we might need. So we had a key allocated for a kiosk so people could check in after hours. And then we also had a spot for a spare key, plus some extras just in case we need, for example, emergency services on site that when someone's not here and so on. So we had a lot of contingency built in as well. And I guess another thing that we've done a lot is we've adapted software that probably was never intended to be used in a certain manner to suit our needs. So one of the examples back in the day that we did was when we started first having staff report their minibar, we were using Android tablets and we ended up just using Google Forms. So we simply just had a form that would go through spreadsheets and produce results that would tell us what guest used how much, how many dollars worth of items, and included things like expired stock reporting and things like that. And the data that was created from that has allowed us to, without having to put any effort into it, make better decisions on what type of minibar stock we should be purchasing and what customers are enjoying and things like that. Another one is that the current software we're using for our PMS, they also provide restaurant point of sale software. We were able to adapt that point of sale software, which was more so if you've got a restaurant and you had a waiter or a waitress wanting to go up and serve a customer and use a tablet to take down the order. That was what the system was designed for, and we've actually converted that into taking breakfast orders for customers, so they can order that the night before they choose. One of the menu items is the time slot that they want their breakfast, and we've been able to adapt that into a fully integrated breakfast ordering system that automatically posts charges directly into our PMS. So it's basically about, I guess, thinking outside the square and going, how else might I use this? And that's allowed us to probably get to where we've got to right now to be able to operate remotely and in a fairly agile manner.
James, that's a fascinating story. And it's amazing how you've sort of been able to adapt to your needs, and adapting to those needs have today helped you out with operating a almost fully remote operation. There'll always be a train of thought in hospitality that says that hospitality and technology is just the tools, right? Hospitality at the core of it is a people business. I've met a lot of general managers who don't believe necessarily in technology and would say people do that job far better than most other people can. But with your particular hotel operations, when you're doing all these innovations, how do you get people that pull in the same direction, that are thinking the way you're thinking about it? Talk to me a little bit about the human element of your business.
Yeah, look, I agree. If you don't have a smiling face at the front desk, it makes it very hard to satisfy customers. And considering we're operating remotely at the moment, that does provide a big challenge. So we've really needed to ratchet up our customer service remotely. We've done that by doing little things like sending welcome SMSs that are automatically generated when our kiosk has a check-in generated. So there's little things like that we've done. But in terms of how we've, I guess, empowered the staff to do it, is it all starts with the right staff. And so setting the culture right from the get-go has been absolutely pivotal to us being able to do this. In the earlier days of running the business, when we had new bits of technology come on board, there was a lot of resistance to change, like any business. people having tasks taken away, and not necessarily tasks they enjoy or tasks that they get intrinsic value out of, but just having tasks taken away because they were simply automated by thinking smarter, not harder. And that did create problems. So making sure that when we did bring people into the business, that they were chosen for their normal attributes, but also for their ability to adapt to change. We tell people right from the stage of, we have a very, I'd dare say, aggressive interview and onboarding process in terms of what we set out to do. And when we have people, we usually have about 6 to 8 people at a group interview. We do set the standard at that point that if you're looking to seek employment for just a paycheck, don't bother coming here. If you can't deal with change, probably now's a good time to leave, because we have changes occurring, what we think is for the better, at least every week, if not multiple times a week. And that could be from fundamental changes that we've been working towards over the last couple of months or even years, right through to little enhancements to existing things where we found a better way to do stuff. It's not that we do change for change's sake, but when we feel there's value to be derived from it, that's when we've made that change. So definitely starting with setting the culture first. The other part, from when people do come on board, it's about constant course correction. That we have done the normal thing of doing appraisals, formal appraisals and things like that. And that is an important way to make sure that people know where they're at. When we do that, we also get people to fill out a self-assessment first. And when we come together for that meeting, if their self-assessment, for example, we mark some things out of 10. So if they mark themselves as a 7 out of 10 for work ethic, and we've got a 5 or we've got a 9, and it's a really big disparity, we know there's something going on in terms of our communication, that we're not on the same page with each other. So I guess it depends. It is really about more so how we're building up that relationship and how we're interacting with each other between those formal interviews. So we we've ended up doing a lot of ad hoc chats and little mini meets and stuff like that, which is what's working for you, what's not working for you, and what's next. Little chats like that that don't necessarily need to be that formal, that make people feel valued and understood. When they're having maybe challenges with maybe a change that's occurred, it's about, we're not setting out that a particular method that we're taking is perfect. It's all about getting that information feedback from the staff who are on the front line, who are implementing it, such that we can make sure it becomes as good as possible. So, I'd say those are probably the main elements. And one other thing is that there's teaching them how to use the tools is absolutely critically important. One of the ways that we've been able to really have quite a solid workload going to all of our staff, and they've been able to help prioritize that, is using a workflow methodology from the 70s by a guy called David Allen, called Getting Things Done, GTD. And we've found that really helpful for people to, I guess, offload some responsibilities onto technology. I guess a bit of a mantra that he abides by is that brains are good for, people are good for having ideas, not for keeping them. And so when we, utilize those ideas and then invest the time in getting the software to do the legwork, that's been really advantageous to us.
That was amazing. We were talking off stage earlier, and you also mentioned another thing about creating or empowering your staff so that they create procedures for themselves. Tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, that's very much centered around, we do use a lot of procedures here. We store all of our procedures in the cloud, and having people have the right culture and attitude and things like that is very important. And then giving them tools to use. But if they don't have a resource where they can fall back upon to make sure they're doing the thing as per best practice, when we're talking about that frequency of change, making sure that our procedures are a foundation for them to work forward. We do take the approach that procedures are made by staff for the staff. There is obviously management oversight, but it's not so much that, you know, myself or my other management team spend all their time banging out procedures all day long to make sure that they're absolutely exquisitely perfect for staff. It's that the staff are, again, on that front line. They know what things are important, what the highlights are for the steps to be performed in a particular procedure. So they know where the emphasis needs to be put on in terms of how to make sure people are doing the steps right. So in terms of, let's say, the accuracy of our procedures, we might have between housekeeping departments and bookkeeping and customer service and things like that, we might have 1,000, 1,200 procedures. I'd probably guess that 80 to 90% of them are perfect in terms of they are up to date and accurate. And the other ones, it's a constant point of evolution. It's more so about progress rather than perfection when it comes to doing those type of things.
That's brilliant, James. We've kind of touched upon so far about how you decided to build a technology tech stack that today is enabling you to operate a hotel remotely. We spoke about how you built a specific culture that was about constant optimization and empowerment, so that you can kind of have people around you that are pulling in the same direction. If I'm a small business owner, what would be the kind of framework you would give me today if I'm starting out?
Yeah. Look, everyone's starting from a different standpoint. So I know that most of the people who are, you know, your clients wouldn't be doing things like using a paper diary for recording their bookings, but I'd say most people would be using a environment such as Microsoft or Google as their sort of starting point. And what most people fall into the trap of is using both, and not one exclusively. So I would say pick the one that you want to use and start with it. So whether you want to use Microsoft like Office 365 or use the Google G Suite, pick one and then work with that from that point. Because both Microsoft and Google do talk to each other, but they don't necessarily talk to each other as well as Microsoft talks to Microsoft or Google talks to Google. So overcoming that barrier can be quite important. And from that point, then you can actually work out where you're going to do things like put procedures. So if you're using Microsoft, you'd use something like SharePoint. I went down that path, and I know SharePoint's improved a lot over the years, but it was not particularly enjoyable. And hiring an expert to come and help you upload procedures is not really the most viable path forward. So we use Google Sites for all of our procedures. We have different sites for different departments, and that helps us have a really simplistic manner to store those procedures, store videos, and yeah, that's absolutely essential for, I guess, a modern business. The other thing would be a password management software. LastPass is probably one of the most reputable out there. I've moved to something like Bitwarden, which is substantially cheaper and basically has all the same features and functionality. But the ability to share passwords with your staff such that they are not visible to the staff, it's not that it's about the trust issue, it's about the exposure. Management being able to limit the exposure for people to make mistakes and things like that won't actually have repercussions is important. Having management be able to update passwords and everyone to basically have a seamless experience and not to have to go and update their personal passwords and things like that for particular sites is pretty important. So I'd say that would be a fundamental thing that would be needed. Another one which we definitely took on quite early is a task management software. Now, if you think about hotels, having a PMS as the center of the business is very, very normal, and I can't see that ever changing. But if you look at most other businesses, whether you were an accountant or whether you're a small manufacturer, having a PMS isn't really the appropriate thing. There's no equivalent piece of software. Having a task management software, so all the workflows are known and replicable depending on the circumstance, and the left hand knowing what the right hand's doing is absolutely fundamental. And there's some really free ones or cheap ones that are quite a high standard. We use Teamwork. Asana is a really good one out there. And if you think about, let's say, my front of house staff, whilst they are using the PMS most of the day, when they have spare time on their plate, the first thing they're doing is they're going back into their project management software to find what's the next priority task for them to take care of. So that's been really important for us having accountability and auditability, and also for being a repository for communication. No one wants another email in their inbox. So being able to use a task management software system that will work with email if you want it to, but captures all the running dialogue on a certain topic within that one spot is, yeah, it's life-changing. In terms of us being able to get off-site, a VoIP system, we use Dialpad, but in this day and age, there's 5 or 10 really good ones out there that are, probably equivalents of $20 per user per month. And for that price, compared to what people normally would have been paying for a full house PABX, it's unheard of. So that's been really important. The ability for me to not have to disclose my mobile number to customers or to suppliers, such that people can either be diverted through to me whether I'm at home or away or whatever the circumstance might be. But also me being able to make a phone call using the work number, no matter where I am. That's a fantastic thing to do. And then I guess it all comes down to the PMS that you use is also critically important. We've been a family-owned business for 25 years. We use the same PMS for about 21 of those years. We know that changing PMSs is it's a particularly hard thing to do. There's a huge amount of friction with your getting all your customer data over. Then there's all creating new training procedures, and to do all that and then to find out maybe a year or two into it that it's probably not the piece of software that you really wanted to use. I really wanted to avoid that, so we didn't test drive, but we analyzed about 270 pieces of software back in 2016, 2017, before we jumped ship of our old supplier. We probably got down to a short list of about 50, then worked that short list down to about 10. We end up using Clock PMS, and the main reason we jumped on board with them is that we could see that they had a proven history of continuous improvement. They publicly displayed what they were updating, the roadmap they were really upfront with disclosing, and so you knew where their priorities were. So many other companies I was digging, and I could find them talking about on their website like synergies between departments of the business, but not actually giving examples as to how they try and help you solve problems. So that was absolutely fundamental. There's quite a few good PMSs out there these days that are taking the integration first approach, such that PMS will talk with a whole bunch of other PMSs. Muse is another one that seems to be coming up and have very much the right mindset for that the PMS is not the be all and end all. It's the centric hub where other things need to be bolted onto the outside of. So that was really important for us getting on board with. And I guess the final thing that's brought it all together would be Zapier. I remember playing around with Zapier back in about 2015, and I was very coy about using it. To think that I was going to put all my username and password details for very sensitive, important bits of software in and let this Zapier thing have free reign to access everything, that was pretty scary. But after dabbling with it over time, when we did change to our new PMS provider, the very first thing I did was lobby them for bringing on Zapier. And for those who don't know what Zapier does, Zapier will take a trigger from one piece of software. So it might be an email that comes into an inbox. It might be a task that gets completed in a bit of task management software. It might even be a phone call that comes through from a certain phone number, and it will then, based on a certain rules or set of requirements, it will then tell another piece of software to do something else. One of the best case scenarios, best examples of this that I've had lately is that when we converted to how we're running right now during this COVID pandemic, we were running a fairly skeleton workforce, even though even though it's remote. And in terms of we're not employing people after sort of 6 p.m. at night at the moment. And so when we have a booking come through after hours, if I miss the message coming through, it comes through via Slack on my phone. If I miss that message, I could potentially miss the need to set up a check-in for a customer, because at the moment, unfortunately, is actually done manually with our kiosk software. And so what we did was you use Zapier such that when a certain rule happens, such as when a booking comes into our reservation system after 6 p.m., it will do its normal thing of sending a Slack message, but it will also use a piece of software called ClickSend, and it now actually phones me and has a voice message. Basically, it will call me and tell me that there's a person checking in by this name for this many nights, and payment details and things like that. So if I miss a message coming through, I certainly won't miss the phone call coming through. So yeah, Zapier has been absolutely pivotal for making sure that we get everything to talk to everything that we want it to. And it's the amount of workload that it's taken off my staff has been fantastic. It seems like every other week come in and tell someone that they don't need to worry about doing this particular task anymore because it's fully automated now. And it's almost a running joke with my staff that they're going to become obsolete now. Now that's not the truth of it, and they know it because it's always been centered around going back to the human side of things. Is that we free up their time so they can invest that time in making sure that our customers are having a great experience. So having my staff have the ability to not have to constantly watch for things that are going on with tasks and reservations and things like that, because a lot of it's automated, such that they can really be present when they're serving a customer, whether it be phone or face-to-face. That's been absolutely fantastic.
That is so important. That's so important. Thank you so much, James, for sharing all that. If I can just sort of wrap it up one more time, it's all about using technology to create data, even if you don't know what to do with that data just now. Then using that data to optimize all the processes that you're currently doing on a constant basis, and then figuring out more automation in which you rely as much on technology to do the heavy lifting for your operation, and then let the people do what they do best, which is to come up with new ideas and to satisfy your customers. Those were like my key takeaways. So thank you so much for your time, James, today. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to catching up with you again.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers.